Hello everyone and welcome to this short and sweet video on call, bind and apply method in JavaScript. We will try to understand the purpose of these three methods and why do they even exist in the JavaScript API. Alright, so let's say that we have an object. Okay, this object contains a name and a function called greet. And this greet function consoles hello, hello and the name. So basically, the this keyword here inside this greet function is pointing to this obj, right? So when I say this dot name, it actually what it does is obj dot name, so which will give us swastik. So let's see this in action. If I call greet from obj, we can clearly see that we get hello swastik, right? Okay, now what if we want to change the context of this grid function? I mean, we want to change the reference of this keyword for this grid. Right now the reference for this keyword in this grid function is this obj, because that's where this grid function is defined. That's the context of this grid function. Right. Now I want to change it. So let's say we have another object. So let's say this is new obj, right? And in here I'll give the name as Yadav. So the name is not swastik in this object. It's still swastik in the above object. Now if I want to change, if I want to when I do this, when I call this greet function, I want to console Yadav but not swastik, and I want to use this greet function. So another way would be I can define a greet function here also, right? And then that thing will be achieved. But I don't want to do that. So one method to do that is called the call method. And what I can do is obj dot greet, right? I want to call this greet function. Okay, I want to call it, but I want to call it with new reference. I want to provide the reference to the this object. So I'll say new obj, and you see now it says hello Yadav, because here I have changed the reference of this keyword from obj to new obj. So the call methods take the first argument as the context which we want to provide for this greet function, and other than that it can also take other regular arguments. Let's say it takes the age, which is 23. Okay, so the greet will take the age and it will also console the age here, right? So we see that we have 23 over here. Okay, yeah, and here also we can give it, let's say here if I give 22, so I'll see 22 over here. So this comes from the greet function, which has its default referencing to the obj. But now with the call method, I have changed the this keyword's reference, this keyword context, to the new obj where the name is Yadav, right? So that's the thing, that's what the call method is. Now there is one more method called apply, which is very similar to call, and this will exactly also do the same thing. Here also I can provide the new obj, which means I'm saying that now greet, for greet, the this keyword context for the this keyword inside greet function should be the new obj and not the obj, right? So it also do the same thing. You see, it gives me other, but it is giving the age as undefined because I haven't provided that argument here. So let's say I give it 24, and you see we get an error. Why? Well, that's where the difference lies between call and apply. Both of them are exactly same thing. The only difference is that after the first argument, call takes the other arguments as comma separated values. Okay, but apply takes them in an array. And now you see we get age 24. So these were the two methods, the call and apply, that we use to change the this context for a given function. Right here we changed the this context for greet function. By default, the this context for this greet function was obj, but we changed it to new obj with apply and call. Now there is one more method which can do the same thing, and that is called the bind method. Well, bind is very similar, exactly similar to this call method. The only difference is that when we use this call method, it calls the greet with the new this context right here. You see, it called it right here and it consoled right here. Okay, but what if we don't want to call it right away? We can have bind, which will return another function which later on we can use. Okay, so for example, let's say we have const, and I will say that bind Yadav. We want a function whenever we call greet with, whenever we call this function, it calls the greet with Yadav, not with swastik. Okay, so which means we want to bind the greet method to this new obj object, right? So let's do that. So obj dot greet, and we are going to bind it with new obj, and we'll also give the age as 25. Okay, so you see, when we did this, nothing happened. We didn't see any console with age 25, right? With name Yadav and age 25. So for that we have to call this bind Yadav, and when we do that, we see hello Yadav age 25. All right, so that's the three methods which can change the context of this keyword for a given function. In this example, we changed the context of this keyword for the given function greet. Earlier, by default, it was obj. We changed it to new obj in these three examples. Well, that's it. Thank you for watching.